Hi, Bryan. It's good to have you here.
Hello, Lorna. Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, I'm just thrilled. I've read actually both of your books already, and I'm just amazed. You're just so real and so, your words come across with such humility and such. It's just everything so real and yet you explain it so clearly. All the stuff that you've walked through, and I just appreciate your writing. It's just really good.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes. Um, well, so just so everybody knows, Bryan is a motivational and inspirational writer and avid blogger. He has written several books about living with ADHD, including the highly acclaimed best-selling book One Boy's Struggle, a memoir. His newest book release is focused on helping writers overcome struggles, and his book is called Writer's Doubt: How You Can Overcome Doubt and Create Work That Matters. You can find these books and others by Bryan on Amazon, and you really should check them out because they're awesome. You can find Bryan also hanging out at his two blogs where he writes about his life experiences and life lessons to encourage others. One of the blogs is called Adderworld, ADDER world.com, which is an online networking community that offers amazing peer support for people coping with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. You can also find him at positivewriter.com, which is an award-winning blog for writers, and I might add my own happy place, where many other creative people receive inspiration to keep working through their struggles and overcome whatever holds them back from creating work that matters. So, Bryan, I'm just so thrilled to have you here. I just think what you've written about can help so many people, and actually, I think it goes beyond writers. I think it's just creative people in general, really.
Well, thank you.
Yes. So we can, if you don't mind, we'll just get on with some questions here.
Certainly.
Yeah,
Shoot.
yeah. In your book, Writer's Doubt, you give us a taste of your story and the struggles you went through on your way to discovering your passion to be a writer. Do you mind sharing some of your story with us? Your struggles and along the way.
No, I don't mind sharing at all. And actually, that's why I wrote the book, is because personally, I've read a lot of books about writing, and I'm sure you have too. And
Yes.
all of them are very helpful. But one thing that I didn't find in some of the books were, I don't know, too many, clear experiences that felt familiar to me. So I decided to maybe break the ice with this kind of dialogue in a book per se, about talking about one's personal experiences and inhibitions and what's actually holding us back
Yes.
in our heads, and
Yeah.
not just putting out the same old thing. Just sit down and write 500 words and you're great. Although I say that too,
Yeah.
uh, because that is true. You need to sit down and just write, but there's more to it.
Yeah.
And in Writer's Doubt, as you read, I get very specific as to what's good to write about, and one of those things is your own inhibitions and what's holding you back. And sometimes those fears that we have that sneak into our writing,
Hmm.
because our story wants to be told, or we want to tell our story, and yet we hold ourselves back from telling our story, and it slips into our writing anyway. So we might as well do it deliberately and get it out there, and that'll help free us from some of the doubts that we have about writing. So I never really read that in a writing book before. I
Yeah.
have experienced that through other endeavors that I've had, such as pool playing and sports wise, which isn't too different. You also have to come overcome a lot of mental hurdles, um, playing in sports and other things. So I was able to mix that together in Writer's Doubt, how that actually although I don't specifically say that in Writer's Doubt, that is part of my training in becoming a professional pool player was the mental aspect of it, and I share a lot of that in Writer's Doubt without actually saying I'm doing that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean that's and I love the analogy actually because you had gone quite far in when you were a pool player, right? You were like doing championships and that sort of thing. So
Yes.
I love that analogy. It's like you have that sort of that discipline already in your life and you just transfer it over to writing. I think that's really cool. Letting go, like what you were talking about. I mean, that is so huge, right? Just because otherwise you're going to hold back what's really in you. And so I guess, I mean, I read your story and you learned how to do that, going to the therapist. That's when you started writing. And it was the writing that, getting your story out, that I think you mentioned that it sort of freed you up, right, to write more. Is that right, Bryan?
Yes, that is.
Yeah.
Therapy was very helpful, and as a matter of fact, it's because of seeking therapy for the behaviors I had, the mental behaviors I had
Yeah.
that I didn't fully understand, which turned out to be symptoms of attention deficit disorder.
Yeah.
Um, my therapist's suggestion was to write my story because as a child, I really struggled with it, and I had terrible grades throughout school, and I was punished pretty severely for those,
Yeah.
for my lack of focus and discipline. So, anyways, my therapist suggested I write my story so that I could clearly understand what I went through and why I did what I did and why I was treated the way I was treated and how I was actually able to find my own way and overcome despite the odds.
Yeah.
And that was very important. And the one thing about writing that no other art form or even therapy can do for you is that once you write your story and it's in writing, you can read it back.
Yes.
And you can go through it and you can see with more clarity what you've been thinking all this time, and then by reading it back you can decide what to keep and let go of. Like you might believe that people hated you for some reason, and then when you read that back you go, well, maybe that wasn't as true as I thought it was, because back then I was in a certain situation and I was blowing it out of proportion in my mind, and it wasn't quite that way. And if you're in therapy at the same time, and I do advise, if you've gone through any kind of serious trauma, to before you write such a story about that trauma, is to seek a coach or therapist, so that you can go through it with them together, because that can get very intense. Still, I think it's important to write your story so that you can go back and see what still holds true for you, what you can let go of, and what maybe you've already learned and overcome. Because one of the things that I see online nowadays that's become very popular is to talk about failure and how it's okay to fail. And I agree with that to a point. I might be going a little bit off topic, but
no, that's fine. Yeah, that's good.
You brought something up just a moment ago, and it clicked in my mind. So the one thing I'd ask your listeners to do when they're reading about failure online and talking about, how I failed and that's a good thing. Well, failure's not always a good thing. Sometimes when you fail and you got to examine why you failed, of course. But the one thing that I have that enables me to write what I write about, the way I write about it, for example, more so in One Boy Struggle than in Writer's Doubt,
Yeah.
is that I've I'm going to say a bad word, so prepare if you're listening. Don't like bad words, close your ears. If you showed your ass as many times as I have,
Yeah.
you you're not too worried about
Yeah.
telling your story, the honesty of your story anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and that comes from playing pool. The first couple years that I played pool, I discovered I was pretty good fast, but I went in over my head even faster, and I kind of embarrassed myself for with some of the losses I had, and really showed my, you know, like I just showed my ass, so to speak.
Yeah.
And but when you've been humiliated to a
Yeah.
certain point, humiliation doesn't really bother you anymore if it doesn't beat you.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's the point
Yeah.
about failure. That before we celebrate failure too much, uh, don't strive to fail. You
No.
know, that's the message online that I'm kind of getting with some of this, where people are taking advantage of this failure message, and it comes across as, well, strive to fail. You don't want to fail, but if you do fail, you want to learn from it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's what happened for me, is that I failed so badly and so miserably in school and in a lot of things. But through therapy and writing my story, I was able to find my way back. And having failed so dramatically and in public,
Yeah.
that it didn't bother me to tell my story, because I get emails all the time about One Boy Struggle, uh, asking me how I could, write about that and share that. And at first those emails and messages would confuse me, and then later I realized, my experience is so different, um, that I have no qualms about sharing those stories and telling the truth. It doesn't bother me, because I've had far worse, and so I'm not embarrassed by them. And what I've discovered is that when you're not embarrassed by them,
Yeah.
when you're not embarrassed by your story, and you're not embarrassed by sharing your story,
Yeah.
it brings out a certain vulnerability in your writing that's very important, and people won't use those, or they won't be able to use those things against you.
Yeah.
For example, if you don't feel embarrassed, nobody can embarrass you. If
Yeah.
the only person that can really embarrass you is yourself, and if you don't feel embarrassed, no one
Yeah.
no one can embarrass you. So don't be afraid to share your story, the honesty of your story. Be respectful and legal, of course, but share your true story and let go. And Writer's Doubt is a book that kind of helps people. That's designed to help people do that. Writers do that. And personally, I haven't found another book that actually writes about it in that way, that you can use what I learned through therapy in order to do that. And so Writer's Doubt, I think, is a very unique book. It's going to take a while to get out there and for people to really discover what it's about. I give you one example, and I know you're probably going to ask the question later on, but I'll go ahead and answer it now.
Sure.
Is that, uh, for example, one of the things you said to me before we actually did the interview was, you were talking about how clear my writing is, and you used a word, I believe you used the word simple. And some people used to send me messages or comment and say how simple my writing was. And I would actually be offended by that, because I thought, well, they're saying I'm a bad writer because I write so simply. But what they really meant was that I write very clearly, and it was very easy to understand
Yes.
with the language that I
Yes.
was using. But sometimes we twist things in our heads to
Yeah.
go like,
Yeah.
oh, so you think I'm simple, huh?
Oh no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Writer's Doubt also addresses that, how we sometimes, kind of get things mixed up in our heads,
Yeah.
especially when critics have said things to us, and that we've taken it internally and we've devoured that message within, and it's built up into something that we have to find a way to let go of.
Yeah.
And that's why I talk a lot about the internal naysayer and critics. But go ahead, you can ask some more questions. Just going on and on here.
Oh no, that's really good. Yes, and I love it that your writing is so clear and so easy to understand. I
avoid that word.
Yeah. No, I think that will draw more people to your writing, and I think also to your blog, right? Because it resonates, right? Because it's easy to understand and just clear. It's just wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, you're welcome. So you kind of you did touch on this. That people don't feel good enough or they have the right qualifications. There's this thing back and forth between, how it's been the last few years between, can I actually get my book out there? If I'm wanting to get it to traditional publishers, I have to have the right qualifications. Or, but now in the last few years, I guess there's two choices, right? We don't have to do traditional publishing.
Right.
We can do self-publishing. I guess the times have changed for both writers and readers dramatically.
That is true.
With the start of self-publishing and the whole digital thing with ebooks, right? And so you talk about how it's really become in your book. I think you call it the new readers market, where readers are the ones who decide who and what story they connect to. You have sort of touched on that, but would you talk a little more about some strategies that have helped you connect so well with your readers?
Okay, well, what I mean by the new readers market is that in the past with traditional publishing, and there's nothing wrong with this, it's just the way it was, is that traditional publishers are a business.
Yeah.
First and foremost, a business. And I think a lot of us get us in our heads that we have to do our best writing and be the best writers in the world and never make a mistake or anything like that to be accepted by traditional publishers.
Yeah.
And we get trapped into that thinking even before self-publishing came along. And the reality is that publishing is a business.
Yes.
Whether it's traditional publishing or self-publishing.
Yeah.
And traditional publishers are investing when they choose a book and send it to bookstores and print it because they're paying for that. And as someone who's been a bookstore manager, I know how expensive it can for shipping, for printing, for all those things. And so traditional publishers want books that can sell, and yes, of course, they publish books that don't sell, but they usually don't know that before they publish them.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to get into that market. So the books that were published were chosen for the most part by the publishers what they thought would have the best opportunity to sell, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a business.
Yeah.
Today, the new readers market is not just about what publishers think will sell.
Yeah.
With traditional publishers, it still is that way. But with self-publishing, you have the opportunity to find a readership, whether you know your book will sell or not. And you have the opportunity to prove whether it will sell. And with stores becoming smaller and smaller and less, booksellers online like Amazon, readers aren't really going to be looking for who the publisher is.
No.
How often do you check out? I have my wife especially has this huge library here of books, and I've read so many of them. and I have no clue who published them unless I actually look, and I really don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
And I find it hard to believe that anybody else is going to care. Now, the one thing that the new readers market is still very concerned about and should be is that you don't want to publish a book that has so many errors in it that it becomes distracting.
Yes.
And so you do want some editing to make sure your book is presented well and it's a good book. You don't just publish anything and think it's going to be okay and readers are going to love it. That's not true. You don't
Yeah.
want to have a book that's so filled with errors that it's distracting
Yes.
and they're not going to buy anything else from you. But that brings up another topic is that One Boy's Struggle was published directly from my journal. And as you read in Writer's Doubt, as I explained, that an editor had edited it for
Yes.
me, but it came across to me almost as a rewrite. So what I did have basic editing to remove any typos and errors and things like that.
Yeah.
It's still a very raw accounting of my life story. And I know a fellow writer, I won't mention his name, good friend though online, keeps telling me that I should have it edited. But the thing about it is, I'm not going to mention the number of copies that have been sold for the book, but print copies, it's pretty amazing number.
Yes.
So I'm not convinced that I need to put the book out there and have it edited to perfection. And maybe one day I have turned down two traditional publishers who have offered to publish it. Because the thing about it is, I have it out there on Amazon. I have the blog. I don't really need a traditional publisher for the book.
Yeah.
But if it would benefit the book, then I would do it. But the presses that have asked me, I've turned them down because I didn't find them to be able to offer me any great benefit above and beyond what I already have. But I also am not. I'm not in it for the money. I already make a living. The money is nice, but that's not why I published the book.
Yes.
And it doesn't. I don't live off the funds from the blogs or the books, so I have a unique ability to put what I want out there and not care whether they sell or not, which actually benefits me in a way. What I'm trying to say is that there has to be a balance of what editing you have in your story, especially if it's like a memoir type book. Do you want it to read like a novel? Do you want it edited just for typos? But the most basic, like in Writer's Doubt, I gave a list of what the most basic editing you need for a book, and I think that's very important, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the next Gone with the Wind or I'm trying to explain something here, and it's a little bit difficult. It's because I don't want to confuse your listeners. It's just that you want a book that is easy to read and is clear and doesn't have a lot of typos in it. But at the same time, you don't need to spend 20 years on a book before you publish it and ship it and put it out there.
Yes.
You can write a book now and take a year and put it together. And if a traditional publisher doesn't accept it, you can take the risk yourself and publish it to Amazon, or you can bypass a traditional publisher altogether. There are no gatekeepers to decide who's going to read your book or who's not going to read your book. If you build a platform, which is important as well, like a blog, if you build a platform and you have a readership and your book spreads, there's no one to say whether it can or it can't. In the past, you needed an agent, you need to get a traditional publisher, and you needed permissions and to be picked. You don't need to wait to be picked anymore. You can just do it. But if you do it, make sure you have at least the basic editing needed so that your book comes across well and professional still.
Yeah.
That's basically what I'm saying there.
Yeah, no, that's really good, and I like what you just said, because this is what held me back for years. But you said you don't actually have to wait to be picked, because I guess maybe that was the old mindset, right? Before
Correct.
self-publishing with traditional publishing, it's like, are they actually going to pick me? It's like you're waiting. Am I good enough?
And
All
act,
these
and
things, right?
exactly. And the new readers market is a market of people who have the ability to read stuff that's not necessarily um, marketed to sell.
Yeah.
Can be for a small niche of people. And like if you have written a book and maybe there's only two or three hundred people in the whole world that would even want to read that book, doesn't mean you can't publish it now. Now you can publish
Yeah.
it. You can publish it digitally or in paperback if you want
Yeah.
to print on demand. But you don't need to have a traditional publisher tell you that it's okay. You don't need them.
Yeah.
And maybe in 20 years there might not be any traditional publishers anymore.
Yeah.
Who knows? And to be honest with you, I would not be surprised if that's the case. There might only be one or two left.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it's very important to get your feet wet with self-publishing, even if you are traditionally publishing, because if those companies are not there in 10 or 15 or 20 years, who are you going to go to? So it's a good idea to already start exploring the new readers market. And the new readers market is basically people picking up whatever they want to read uh, that appeals to them. And that was the same thing with traditional publishing before, but the traditional publishing books that were published were selected by editors and the corporate types that decided what would make money. But now there's books out there that are proving to be great sellers that weren't necessarily would have been picked up by any traditional publisher.
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that great? That's so freeing that, just write what's on your heart. And
True.
yes, you'll have to, clean it up a bit from, the errors and the, things on the manuscript. But other than that, get it out there. And it's so freeing from the other concept of having to wait until someone picks you or something. So
Right.
yeah,
You don't have to wait on anyone now.
no, and that's really good.
And for me, that's kind of important because I'm an impatient person. I am,
Yeah,
and I don't. Although I do have an agent, I don't I don't write a book and say, "Oh, I'm going to pitch this to traditional publishers," because I don't even have it in my mindset to pitch it to anyone anymore. I honestly don't. When I'm finished with the book, I don't even think about pitching it to a traditional publisher. Um, I pretty much already have it in my mind that I'm going to uh, publish it, self-publish it myself already. I have Positive Writer, although it's only about 12 months old, or maybe a little bit longer, 13 months, is already 50,000 readers strong.
that's amazing.
Yeah, I think so too,
Yeah,
actually. And so I don't really need to wait for somebody to select it. A writer's doubt is having a slow start, I think, but that's okay because the feedback I'm getting from it is really amazing, which is more so than any of my other books that I've put out there. Um, but I already had quite a large community through the ADHD world,
yes,
World, my other websites, and for example, my memoir
yeah,
has done really well, outselling traditional counterparts, which is amazing. But it goes to show that going traditional route doesn't necessarily mean you're going to sell more books than you would if you went self-publishing.
yes,
So I really don't even look at traditional publishing anymore as an option for me. Now, if like a major traditional publisher called me up and made an offer, doesn't mean I would turn them down. It just means that they're not my first choice.
Yes. It's nice to be sort of in that, have that option, I guess, nowadays that we can do that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody has that option, not just
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Um, and when you start a blog or website online, you have the opportunity to reach everyone in the world that can access the internet.
Yeah.
Uh, you're not limited to a certain number of people or getting your book on a bookshelf. Because as a bookstore manager, I can tell you that there's only so much space on the bookshelves in a bookstore, and especially as the bookstores get smaller, uh, there's not a lot of space. So even though you go traditional publisher, it might only be available online.
Yeah.
It might not. It might never make it inside of an actual physical bookstore.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to turn people off traditional publishers, but I don't think there's going to be too many more major, like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling's that come out and sell millions and millions and millions of copies through traditional publishing. I think there's still going to be those, but I don't think it's going to be as it was in the past because there's too many options now. There's too much to choose from, and it makes it more difficult, I think, for any one person or any one book to be so much more than any other.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm saying that correctly or not. I think that's going to slow down is what I'm trying to say, is these major names that we used to have that stood above everyone else, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that I think it's going to be more difficult for that to happen in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking maybe there is someone that is, maybe a new writer and maybe even new to platform building and all of that. Maybe they aren't sure if they should start a blog or, what would you say to someone has been holding back maybe, but they feel like they would like to write a book and all of that. What would you say to someone like that?
It's say to someone who's holding themselves back.
Yes, yes. From maybe they would like to be a writer, but they just maybe they have fear holding them back. What would you say to someone like that?
Okay, good. Thank you. The easy answer is to just write. But as we all know, it's just not as simple as that. It depends on what's holding the person back. And if it's doubt or fear, what I would say to them is pick up a copy of my book.
Absolutely.
But for the most part, as simple as it sounds, it's so true. You write for yourself, if nobody else. And although practicing publicly is a great thing, like on a blog or so,
yes.
but you can, if nothing else, at least get yourself a personal journal and write every evening or every morning, just for 10, 15 minutes, just for yourself, and write your story. You don't have to share it with anyone. Yeah. And that's actually how I started out with One Boy's Struggle. It was my personal journal that I wrote for myself and no one else. And it was modified to be published. But anybody that picks up One Boy's Struggle will see that for the most part, it still is my personal journal. And it just has some modifications in there to make it look like it's a was written for publication, but it's not. And I probably never will edit it to be, or if I do revise it, I'll probably keep the original available as well. But what I'm trying to say is just write, even if it's just in your own personal journal. You don't have to share it with anyone. There might come a time where you're confident, and this will happen naturally. If you write for yourself and you have your own personal journal, over time your confidence will increase because it's only natural. The more you do something, the more you're confident increases, and eventually you might choose to start a blog and share your writing with others. And then at that point, you have to decide if you're ready for the feedback that you're going to receive, and that's an important factor. And
Yeah.
I understand why people are genuinely scared of sharing their work and being criticized, because I know some people, and I know because I've received some emails. I know some people don't like me saying that writers can be the worst critics of other writers, but unfortunately, it's true.
Yeah.
And and so I can see why a lot of people are fearful of putting their work out there and for it
Yeah.
to be criticized and critiqued. Um, but there comes a point where you have to do that. And my
Yeah.
suggestion for you is to find a good writers group, like you and I are members of Tribe Writers, but
Yes.
find a group that you feel comfortable in, and then find a over time you find a couple people that you really trust, and only share it with them. Don't if you're writing a book, you don't have to share parts of it with the whole wide world. Now,
Yeah.
if you're writing a blog, anybody can comment on it, but
Yeah.
if it's your story and you're writing a book, then share it with the minimum amount of people. And then once you decide to publish and it's out there, let go of just let go of the project, so that when people do criticize
Yeah.
it, and there will always be people that
Yes.
don't have positive criticism,
Yeah.
when people do give you negative feedback or criticism, that doesn't tear you apart, because the reality is people will do that, whether it's the best book in the whole wide world or not. You just have to find out what's true and what you can improve on and do that. And that's why you need a couple people that you really trust to give you honest feedback, and not too many people where the feedback that's coming back at you is confusing. Because a lot of people do that. They put their work out there and have 10, 15, 20 people offer them feedback, and a lot of that feedback will contradict each other, and it'll become confusing. So,
Yes.
and limit that just to a few people you trust.
Yeah. No, that's really great, and I'm so glad you mentioned Tribe Writers too, Bryan, because I was just thinking if anyone is listening, right? Then that's I don't know when Jeff always has. He's the guy that started Jeff Goins started Tribe Writers, but yeah, I just think that's so important what you were saying, that you have people in your life that you can just a few that you can give your words to, and that they will be nice about it when when they see stuff that should be changed in your manuscript or whatever, right? Yeah.
You have to be able to accept honest feedback, but
Yeah.
you don't want cruel feedback, because there are people out there.
Yeah.
You can read books on Amazon that have sold hundreds of thousands of copies, and you'll find 1 and 2 star reviews that are absolutely brutal. But it doesn't stop those authors from continuing to write and put more work out there. Now, I will say this: if you're putting work out there and you're not, having anybody double check it and maybe edit it a little bit for the the basic editing that every book needs. If you're not doing that and you're getting criticism and you feel it's unjustified, you might want to relook at that. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, if you've really put your heart into your work and you're confident that there's no typos in it, or there are very few, because to be honest with you, I haven't seen a self-published book yet that has absolutely no typos. But it's still, they should be minimal and
Yeah.
unnoticeable for the most part.
Yes.
But either way, if you feel like you've put your best work out there and it's presentable, and you receive a few really harsh comments or negative criticisms, you have to be able to let go of that work
Yeah.
and not worry about what people say. And that's the part where I talked about earlier about failure and showing my ass, is that when you've been there,
Yeah.
you're not affected so much
Yeah.
by that. For those out there putting their first book or
Yeah.
their first whatever
Yeah.
out there in the open market, it can be pretty horrifying when you receive that criticism back that's basically telling you that you've published junk, or that it didn't
Yes.
resonate with them, and that
Yeah.
they hated it. And that will happen.
Yeah.
And uh, there's no sense in telling people that that won't happen,
Yeah.
because it will.
Yeah.
And there will be people that just don't get it. But there will also be people that do get it.
Yeah.
And those are the people you're trying to reach. So you don't inhibit yourself from publishing just because of those people that won't get it. You can't do anything about them.
Yeah.
And this is also important to know, is that you can't write for those people that won't get it and that don't want to get it. You can't write for them.
No.
I had a email recently that someone didn't agree with me, and there was nothing wrong with that person disagreeing with me, but I didn't spend any time trying to change or modify what I was writing so that she would agree with me. I had no time for that, and I didn't find it necessary at all. And that's my suggestion to readers, is if the majority of people are really saying you did something that just doesn't make any sense, then maybe it doesn't make sense. But if you're reaching the people you intended to reach, and they're telling you that this means a lot to them,
Yes.
unless you're really out there trying to make $1 million off this work, and you want it to be popcorn that everybody can then that's fine. But if you're just trying to get your message out there and reach those specific people, then do that. And don't worry about those who don't care about it. Don't worry about the ones you're not writing for.
Yeah.
Because you will get comments from the ones that you're not writing for that happen upon it. But you don't change your writing for them.
Yes.
If the people you're reaching resonate, and they agree, not necessarily agree, but they are, it appeals to them, and they tell you that your writing touched them in some way, and those are the people you intended to reach, then you're good to go. And you don't need to change your writing for the ones that you did not intend to reach, and for whatever reason they didn't like it. And I see that happen a lot, because our writing is very sensitive to what we put out there, and it means a lot to us. And then when people comment back to us that our work wasn't intended in the first place, and then we're like, we end up stuck again, and our writer's doubt, starts to build in our minds. It starts to play tricks on us. And we have to be able to recognize when doubt is talking us out of doing what we love to do. So that's the thing about criticism. Find one or two people that you really trust. I would say 2 or 3 people that you really trust, and will give you honest feedback and criticism that you need to improve. But don't put it out there for 50 people to read before you've actually published it, that you're not sure if this book will appeal to them or not. You don't want a lot of yes people that'll just write you back and say, oh, this was beautiful, this was wonderful, and not tell you that, hey, on page 3, you said something and it didn't make any sense whatsoever. You want to know that. But you don't want to be reaching people that will hate your work before they even read it. And unfortunately, that's the way the world is. There are people out there that will hate you before they ever even read it.
Yeah. No, that's really good, Bryan. I think that's just to hit the nail on the head there.
There'll be people out there that don't agree with you self-publishing. They'll tell you that, oh, self-publishing doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you're a published author. I've sold thousands of copies of books more than some
Yeah.
traditional published authors
Yeah.
have sold. I mean, I was talking. I had dinner recently with a traditionally published author, and we were talking, and I was telling him about my experiences with One Boy Struggle and the number of copies, print copies sold, and it kind of surprised me when he was telling me the number of copies that his book sold, which was about 20, a fraction of what One Boy Struggle.
Yeah.
I was just, I was like, the, I think the problem is that people see traditionally published is that when you're picked, you finally mean something, that your name has some kind of security
Yes.
meaning because you've been picked. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do better
Yeah.
by being traditional published.
Yeah.
Because nowadays you have self-published books that are reaching millions of people and are selling millions of copies.
Yes.
You know, they might start out with thousands of copies, but and that's good too. But most books that are traditionally published don't even make their money back,
Yeah.
and the author doesn't receive anything. So if you, for example, go with KDP on Amazon and you publish your book basically for free, not counting the editing costs and whatever you had to do to get your book ready, but basically you can publish it on Amazon for free and offer it as digital downloads around the world, and whatever you make off of it is pure profit.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
whatever your editing costs and things like that cost, you'll have to make up for. But for the most part, you don't have to worry about printing it. You don't have to worry about, having this huge inventory. The costs that used to be involved are simply not there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a different world today. So waiting to be picked so that you can say you're traditionally published and have your name in lights or whatever. You can get your names in lights without being traditionally published.
Yeah.
It wasn't 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah, vanity publishing was kind of like it really was kind of like vanity because you couldn't reach any market with them without putting a couple cases of books in your trunk and driving to every bookstore
Yeah.
around trying to get it out there. But now that's totally different. Self-publishing can reach it as many, if not more, than what traditional publishers reach. I wouldn't say if not more, but can reach as many people
Yes.
as a traditional publisher can reach. The only work that you have, which is actually the same work you would have if you are traditionally published, is building a platform and getting the word out. You're still going to have to do that no matter
Yes.
how. So why not remove the third party and do it yourself, unless you actually want to physically be in bookstores, which is okay. But if you can reach a market on your own, then you don't need to share the profits with anyone.
Yeah.
But again, I have that ability not to worry about, making a living off my books. I can do how I choose. So each person has to decide for themselves, because I don't want you to be out there going, Bryan said. You choose for yourself. I don't need to make money off my books.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a fortunate thing that I don't need to, and I end up making it anyway.
Yeah.
And that freedom, that sense of freedom, I think everybody needs to have so that they can view things a little bit differently.
Yes.
And not get bogged down in the red tape with, I need to make this and this and this and this. First, you need to make a budget that you can live with, that you can afford on editing and all those aspects of creating a book cover, and so on. And then once you do that and you put your work out there, once you've covered your budget, if you're doing this for gas money or to pay the rent, then you have other things you need to look at, and maybe a traditional publisher might help you there. But I don't think anyone can just come out of the gate nowadays and say, "Oh, I'm going to make a living writing books." It doesn't. Just doesn't work that way. First, you have to write the books and put them out there and see what happens.
Yeah.
Because I know another traditional published author that I am good friends with. We were talking as well here recently, and he's really frustrated because he's not selling the books that he thought he would. He's not even making the money back for the traditional publisher that he received in advance. So he actually, I don't know whether he's going to have to pay money back or not. So I'm not trying to scare anybody off of traditional publishing. Don't get me wrong. It's just that it's not what we grew up with, what it once was.
Yes.
It's changed so much. It doesn't mean that you're going to make a living if you are chosen to be traditionally published. That's great and all, but it doesn't mean you're going to make a living. It doesn't mean you're even going to sell a book. So, aside from selling it to the traditional publisher, one thing. So that's very important to realize, that could be the case. That also, when you do get picked, if you're picked, and you decide to go with traditional publishing, that you have to realize that you're also giving up your rights.
Yes.
And that's very important, as when you self-publish, your rights are yours.
Yes.
And you keep them. And that's very, very important to realize. Because if you do accept, like, say, a small press gets a hold of you and says, "Okay, I'd like to publish your work. I'm going to give you this and this," and then they actually don't sell many copies of your books, but they've got your rights for the next 10 years, and you can't do anything else with that book. That's the one thing that held me back, I think, most from allowing One Boy Struggle, or accepting the two offers I did get for One Boy Struggle. I did not accept them because I didn't feel the offers were strong enough to beat out what I was, how the book was already doing.
Well, that's really good, Bryan. Okay. Thanks so much for you're just a fount of wisdom when it comes to, like, writing and self-publishing, and all.
I hope I didn't talk over all of your questions, because I knew you had several of them. And,
no, you did great. You actually covered more than I even asked. So I do have one more question, actually.
Sure, go for it.
I'm just wondering, this is just a really easy question, but
sure.
I'm sure people listening would love to know, what new books or projects you have on the go.
Writer's Doubt just came out recently. It's available on Amazon. It's doing very well, as far as I'm concerned. What I really love about it is the feedback I'm getting back.
Yes.
I really am fortunate that this is really, and that's what I was most nervous about. And I think that every author is nervous when they put their work out there.
Yes.
I've never written for writers. Per se. I am with my other books, ADHD. I knew the people I was writing to or for, and I knew pretty much how they might react, and so I was comfortable. Let's put it that way. And putting a book out there for writers, I was a little bit more uncomfortable about doing that. I remember Jeff had read the book. Jeff Goins had read the book almost 2 years ago now, and he wrote back how critical other writers can be, And he didn't mean that other writers were going to tear it apart or anything like that. It's just that uh, that made me even more nervous. Let's putting a book out there for writing. But I was so confident in what I was saying that I felt that it would connect because writers are human beings, and that's sometimes what we forget is
Oh,
that
yes.
writers are not just some people out there that are just stuck up and sitting, sipping their tea and coffee and thinking they're better than everyone else. And that's not the case. We're human
No.
like anyone else, and the struggles we have are very similar to the
Yes.
struggles I write about in One Boy Struggle and my other
Yes.
book.
Yeah.
So once I decided to say, hey, these are people too, and they have the same, maybe not identical issues, but we all have similar issues that we're dealing with. That I'm not going to put a book out there that I'm trying to, like I said earlier, just appeal to a certain stereotype. No, I'm going to write from the heart. I'm going to
Yeah.
write to another human being and see how that goes. And so the feedback that's come back so far has just been absolutely amazing. And I'm very fortunate for that. And I was so insecure, I'll be honest with you, I was insecure about how the book would be accepted. Um, that it's kind of funny. It's only been out there for a couple weeks now, and it has 18 5-star reviews and one 4-star review, and that's it right now, which is pretty awesome. I'm like,
Yes. Oh, that's
eh,
amazing.
I'm just, and I'm very appreciative of that. But it's like I said, you just have to take the risk. You have to put it out there
Yes.
and see how that goes, because you can be doubtful all day long and remain doubtful the rest of your life and do nothing, or you can just take a leap and try, and who knows, it
Yeah.
might work out. And if it doesn't, try again.
Yes.
Don't give up on your dream,
Yeah.
whatever your dream may be, whether it is writing or something else. But what I am working on in the future is I don't know whether you know this or not, but I had a free ebook I used to give away called 10 Things I Hate About ADHD, which is not writing related, uh, that I'm going to publish on Kindle maybe later this year or next year. It's been downloaded for free for about 100,000 times, well, more than 100,000 times by now.
Yeah.
Um, and I've expanded on that book. So that's the project I'm currently working on that I'm going to probably go ahead and self-publish this year as well. Um, so that's about it. I don't. Oh, I'm sorry. What I wanted to tell you is I was so worried about writer's doubt that I published about 3 or 4 excerpts on my blog before I actually published the book, just to see how it would do. And that's kind of the reason why I started Positive Writer to begin with. And those have become my most popular blog posts. So I felt very confident once
Oh,
I
yes.
published the button.
And actually, that's actually a really good idea, just to put it
Yeah,
out there, you know? That's
to see how
great.
you can test the waters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you go to the blogging section, the bonus section in the book,
Yeah.
uh, I put that in there that parts of the book had already been published on my blog
Yeah.
just to see how they would do. That's the great thing about having a blog. You can do that.
I know. Hey, so you just gave me an idea. Love
Cool.
that. Well,
Well,
thanks so much, Brian. I mean, you just, people are going to have to listen to this over and over again because you have so much great encouragement and information here.
oh,
Um,
really? I wasn't just babbling along?
no, you have so much. It's probably just second nature to you, and so it just, you can just talk about it because you've been a writer for so long now, right? So it's really good. So thank you for being on the podcast today, Brian. Really appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Yes, and for those listening, go right now and pick up your copy on Amazon today of Brian's amazing book, Writer's Doubt. Also check out his blogs, positivewriter.com and Adderworld, ADDER world.com.
Thank you so much.